Welcome to the Healthy Perspective Podcast with your host, chiropractor, entrepreneur, mentor, and author, Dr. Chris Bowman. He'll break down and extract the secret sauce behind his own success and the success of some of the top leaders in every category and from around the world. Get ready for your weekly mental adjustment because shift is going to happen.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Healthy Perspective Podcast. This is going to be a fun one. Many of you know that not only am I a chiropractor, not only am I a author, a consultant, a family man, but I'm also a regenerative farmer. We have a farm that we started last year where we have a couple cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys, and we're working on doing good for the land and doing good for our bodies. And in that, I joined a group to help me understand more about what I'm doing and troubleshoot and whatnot. And so I've been a part of that group for, I don't know, maybe about a year, about the same amount of time. And I was perusing the group the other day. It's always good to see somebody else's stories, see how somebody else's day is worse or better than yours, animals escaping and all of those things. And I saw Jessica, who is our guest, story, and it was a pretty long post, and I was so inspired by what she wrote that I'm like, I need you on my podcast. And so literally I asked her, and within 3 days she scheduled. And so today we have Miss Jessica with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just really excited that you reached out.
You know, that's the beauty of the internet, because, 10, 20 years ago, we probably never would have met, never would have connected, and never would have inspired the lives that are going to be listening to this. So I love having the opportunity to connect in something that is, uniting us, which is farming, and then something that uniting us where, making the world a better place, essentially, in our little part
we
of the
have
world.
a united vision and then united virtual presence. It's kind of surreal because it's that sense of community and coming together. It's almost like we took a shortcut.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those of you that aren't in that group and didn't read that post, let's just start the conversation there. So basically what caught me is, I think she did like a hook line where it's like, I had $1,500 to invest into my farm, and this is what happened. And she laid out this whole story of trials and tribulation and now living in somewhat of a productive farm, changing a whole bunch of habits. And so selfishly, I wanted to hear the rest of the story and have an excuse to talk to her. And so Jessica, why don't you kind of just give us some context of who are you kind of pre-farming? What were the questions? What were the things that led to, maybe joining the Abundance Facebook group and then got you into farming? And then maybe we'll start to talk about like the business of farming and moving up from there. So who were you before farming, and what made you transition into the homestead lifestyle?
Oh man, I think I must have been born a farmer and just had no idea that, like, I knew it was an option, quote unquote, in life, but I never really understood how gratifying finding your work versus finding your job could be. I mean, everyone's got a job. Everyone does things to provide for themselves, for their family, for the people that are important to them. But finding your work is different. Work with like a capital W, where you just feel like you're in the right place at the right time, doing what you're supposed to do. And I never thought that thing for me would be farming. But now, knowing what I know now, I think it all makes a lot of sense. I grew up with a lot of, I would say, very traditional background where you were raised in a suburban community, in a nice neighborhood, you went to a nice school, you got good grades. I never really felt any connection to that lifestyle, but I participated in it. And then I went to college the first time for music, and I found a little bit more of that spark, but it still wasn't something that I felt like was my work. It was closer to it. It was a passion, but it still, I feel like it took more than it gave, if that makes sense. And for working those really long days where you really give it your all, you really needed to fill your cup. So I gained a lot of experience in teaching, and I feel like I'd sort of danced in a spiral around finding my work going to school the second time around. for engineering, or engineering leading into operations management. Totally different from the artist scene, totally different from music.
Two different
And
sides of your brain there.
Literally the left and right side, or the right side being creative and the left side being
analytical.
Yes, I always get them confused, and I guess that makes sense because they're swapped on your body. But once I went through that program and got my second bachelor's degree, I sort of dove into the behind the scenes administrative side and exercised that part of me, and got an engineering job and document control. And at one point I was working full-time in this internship. I was successful at it. I was going to school for operations management while I was in document control. So it was self-supporting. I was volunteering at a local winery as their operations manager, and really cutting my teeth and learning the hard way a whole lot of business practice in a very tight community. I moved to where I am now. Like, all of this happened at once, and I was so burnt out that I can't even communicate the level of spiritual exhaustion, and just had it up to hereitude with giving and giving and giving, and not feeling like I was getting much back, but also knowing that I was setting the groundwork to be able to thrive later. It was a really hard season. And I mean, this season is also really hard, but I at the same time wouldn't trade it. It's the right kind of hard instead of the wrong or bad kind of hard.
Yeah.
So after all of that, after quitting my full-time job, because I'd always intended on getting credentials to be an at-home either consultant or some kind of virtual or work remote employee, getting that part-time remote job, ironically doing almost mindless work. I edit PDFs for the majority of my work, and I set my own hours. It's very flexible. It's what I need it to be. But it was a total culture shock. And I went from being recognized as, like, publicly recognized as someone who's doing this great program in school, who's a young intern who's achieving good things in this company, and all of the boxes were checked, to none of the boxes were checked. I wasn't bringing home the bacon. I wasn't before. Even my husband brought home twice as much money as me when I was working at my peak. And it became like almost like I was invisible. And I think a lot of people go through that, where they make a decision to convert from working at their job to working at their work. And for me, my work was starting to grow things on our property, starting a family, which was a challenge for us, and really providing in redefining what providing really means, and redefining what wealth and value really means. And I had a really rough time once I got to the point where enough time had passed. I had not been working outside the home besides like a few hours in my remote job per week for long enough for taxes to recognize that I had almost no income. I signed up for life insurance right after my baby was born, our son, and my husband qualified no problem, but I didn't qualify for even a third of what he qualified for because I wasn't considered worth that amount of money.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was.
That makes you feel good.
Yeah, that was really a wake-up call that, well, I don't really know what it was a wake-up call for, but I just know that it was like a bee sting on my soul. It was not okay with me. And that's when I decided that if I was going to be worth a set amount of dollars, essentially, or valued at a set amount of dollars, I was going to take those dollars and turn it into what I valued the most. So in this case, it would be taking the time I spent making money, like making cash, and turning that specific cash into feeding my family, feeding my community, providing, and taking the narrative of the only type of provider is the provider that brings home the bacon into literally bringing home bacon.
Right.
And providing in that sense.
Which is much more valuable these days anyways, especially I'm here in California and I think our bacon prices are about to skyrocket.
It's an
So,
interesting switch, that's for sure. And it's hard to
yeah,
say which one is worth more, but I feel like it's almost like comparing apples and oranges.
right.
They're two very valuable and very real needs.
Yeah. Yeah. So going from burnout to feeling devalued, essentially, like almost going through an identity of like, man,
Oh
like
yeah.
the people that are supposed to insure me don't even think I'm worth insuring. Like
Yeah.
that's got to inspire you. How was your relationship with your husband and whatnot, like
Oh my God. Yeah.
reinforcing these, because those are some serious negative thoughts that can stick with you and demons that can haunt you for a long time.
It
What are
can
some
haunt a
strategies?
partnership, that's for sure. And like when you're not the one bringing in actual cold hard cash, when
Hmm.
you're contributing something different, and it could be hard in a million different ways, and every person's hard is slightly different, but my hard and my husband's hard was his narrative and self expectation that if he fell apart we would lose everything. That
Mm,
really scary mindset of, if I don't do this, everyone is going to lose everything. And then
mm,
my mindset of, if I disappeared, no one would even realize. There wouldn't even be
mm,
an impact. And it was like those realities together, it just started this like cyclone of self-doubt
yeah,
and almost resentment.
yeah,
And I mean, that thrown in with having a baby, I feel like all of it is just a perfect storm cloud for exposure. It exposes everything on your mind, it
yeah,
exposes every insecurity, every
yeah,
doubt. And it really turned us into people who had to question that or give into it. So we
yeah.
had the option to say, yep, that's true, that's the reality of things. And the only other alternative was saying, what if that's bull?
Mm,
And really saying, well, if that's bull, what's possible? Or
yeah,
just trying the impossible and
yeah.
seeing if it actually held true, like if it was achievable, and if that's achievable, or if that was a lie, or if that isn't true, and questioning your own narratives.
You know, as you're talking, my mind is just going to, especially in today's day. How old are your kids, Jessica?
I just have one, and he
You just
is
have your
seven
one.
and a half
Seven and
months.
a half. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I'm 31.
okay. So yeah, so we are new in the game. My oldest is 5, so I don't have, anyone, teenagers or anything like that. But thinking about these kids, maybe especially girls, but guys can struggle with it too, especially in today's day and age with, you know, all the political divisiveness, the health divisiveness, parental, like all the division that's going on. I can see so many girls, listening to this podcast, listening to you speak, and just being like, "Oh my gosh, that's me." Like I don't have, I just got dumped by my boyfriend. I got a D in math and my parents don't
Yeah.
want me. I don't necessarily feel like I want to go to college. Like
Yeah.
why what am I worth?
What am
How
I
did
worth? That's such a huge question. And it transcends any identity. And in, yeah, like you said, today's day and age, everything it's so exposed and vulnerable in a new way because people are so divisive. There's a lot of inquiry, like, who are you?
right,
What are your values?
right.
And it's not, you don't have the option to hide or blend
No.
in,
Right.
or even to not pick a side like you could culturally, I think. And this is totally me in my young 31 years saying this. I'm sure someone who's lived through more of the US climate would be able
Mm-hmm.
to weigh in a little bit more holistically. But I really do feel like it can be such an interesting set of pros and cons. Like, I think my friend circle, I'm one of those people that has the privilege of not being a target. I blend in really well with any crowd, and I like to play a game of how long can I have a conversation with someone without them guessing my religious views or non-views, without them guessing my political views or non-views. And I try to zero in on what their buttons are in a positive way. Like, you can tell in the workplace when someone's pushing someone else's buttons just to get a rise out of them. Well, there's opposite buttons to that too. There's buttons that like give people an uncomfortable amount of security and comfort and not just a false sense. But I feel when you give someone their favorite food, they have a really, really hard time having distrust or contempt for you in any way, or not wanting, like when you make someone laugh, it's really hard for them to treat you as maliciously as they had intended, if that was their intent. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And I think that in itself almost answers the question, where it's like, even if nobody assigns value to you, that doesn't mean you can't provide value to other people. Like, you don't need,
like, recklessly assigning value to people is a radical act. It's a very, like, it's an act of anarchy a little bit when devalued people are suddenly valued. And I based a lot of my career on that, and I found a lot of sympathy with that kind of motivation in my current work. When I started going to the farmers market, it started, I think, in one of my first jobs out of college. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club through the AmeriCorps Vista program. And that program was so, I hate to say deeply flawed, but there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of struggle for the people going through it because it's designed to give you experience serving communities that are at or below poverty levels economically, but they also want you to have an immersive experience. So they specifically pay you less than minimum wage.
Wow.
And that's the whole point, is to understand what this animal really is. And then going through that and just having a really hard time because of the nature of the beast of nonprofits, I started working as a tutor through my second college. Was that my second? Yes, that was. I get confused between my colleges, but I worked as a tutor there, and that fed into the current college that I tutor at. I didn't attend as a student, but I did become a teacher through their tutoring program that was specifically targeted for underserved demographics. And underserved demographics are literally all walks of life. All you need is to have some kind of, not obstacle, but lack of privilege at some point in your life in order to qualify for the program. And all your tutoring is free to you, but I'm compensated through the program. And that was kind of like an aha moment, because it really questioned that narrative of people who need the most are usually the ones who have to pay for it the most. Like the people who really need to be able to grow their own food rarely have the ability to buy a piece of land in order to do that. It's this gatekeeping cycle. And I found that again at the farmers market. I found out that my town's farmers market matched your EBT, your SNAP purchases. So one, you could actually use your SNAP benefits, your what used to be called food stamps, at that market for anything fresh. And that included fresh vegetable starts. Like any living plant was considered part of that program, which is insane. Same with seeds. So that was a mind blower. But then at the same time, there was a match program. So federally, there was a $40 match. And then the farmers market itself paid the rest of the match. So if someone brought like $100 worth of EBT benefits, of SNAP benefits, they swiped their card at the booth, you were given tokens, and you could spend $200 at the market.
Wow.
And I mean, usually it was people would go weekly because a lot of it was fresh,
Yeah.
and you would spend maybe $20 to $40 at a time. But
Right.
that's
Right.
doubling
It's
your
amazing.
food, but also your
Right.
ability to provide food for yourself. So it
Right.
was, that alone was enough to keep me going, keep me showing up, and just like throwing plants into people's pockets on their way out. Even
Right.
if they didn't have room, I'd be like, then take the seeds, you can keep
Right.
them, or you could,
Right.
or have them come back and get the actual gourd once my plants had actually produced, and send them
Right.
home with like the biggest zucchini I'd ever grown, or
That's
something
awesome.
like that.
Yeah. So let's backtrack, and then we'll land right where we're at. You had this, I don't want to say a crisis, more of an awakening of like, I
Oh,
am
it's a
going.
crisis. It's many crises. That's the thing. Everyone likes to reframe in the aftermath. They
Yeah.
love to retrospectively be like, what a beautiful transformation.
Right.
But your life can be truly hell for so long.
Yeah.
Even if it's beautiful, it's
Right.
still, it's
Hard in the
both at the
moment.
same time.
Yeah.
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 It's almost a disservice to take away the grittiness.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a death every time
Right.
that you have a little bit of life.
Right. It reminds me of, did you ever see the movie Inside Out?
Yes.
Like the animated movie, and it's like Happy tries to get all happy balls all the time,
Yes.
but it made it so much better when Sad and Happy were together, because the contrast made you feel more,
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
those
like living
crises are the same.
holistically.
Right. Yeah.
Crisis
So
is a part of it.
absolutely. Yeah. Because you ask yourself different questions in a crisis than you would when things are going really well.
Oh yeah.
So you ask yourself these questions like, okay, what am I worth? What am I going to do to produce? Now tell me a little bit more of the story that you wrote on Facebook. Let's give people a little bit more juice to the story. What I saw is you had $1,500 to invest in kind of starting your homestead. Talk us through that.
So I'm trying to remember all of the details that I included, but in a nutshell, it was at December 2020, and I had that oh crap moment where I realized my value internally and externally had been completely flipped on its head or removed. It felt like the rug was pulled out from under me, and I was about to have a baby, my first baby on top of all that. So I set the intention out and the goal out and the actual framework of making it a reality out of taking the time that I had to spend, because my time had become my currency more so than my money.
Right.
My money was more, the little money I was making was going towards paying off some debt, like some credit card debt, which we still have. But my time I would turn into the thing that I valued the most. So instead of putting a lot of stops in between A and Z, going all through all the letters of like getting a resume, then getting a job, then getting the money, then getting the ingredients, then cooking the ingredients, and then preserving that, and then all that, I would just skip straight to Z, and I would take a small chunk. Well, as I say small, but $1,500 is not small. I took the amount in my savings and I said, how much can I turn this? How much can I magnify this? If I spend this $1,500, can it make me back $1,500? Or if it can't make me back that $1,500, can I turn it into something that's more valuable? Like, can I trade it for something that's worth more? And I started this project. So in January, I set most of the groundwork up. I did all the behind the scenes, like website permits and everything. I did all my purchasing, and I took out my seeds, and I didn't spend any money buying new seeds. I just used up the ones that I had. I set everything up, and February and March came, and I had my baby on March 2nd, and we knew that postpartum was going to be a really long road of recovery for me. And then we pretty much found out that, yep, we were right. So by the end of March, I was really hurting. The first week of my son's life, he had jaundice really bad. And
Oh, wow.
I was the provider of food, and my milk didn't come in for 5 days.
No.
So we were figuring out, I was figuring out how to be a provider in any sense at that point, because I wasn't in my mind. That was probably the point where I valued myself the lowest, when I didn't have my breast milk. I didn't have my physical body back at all yet. I was sucking up the resources of our family, time and energy wise. We couldn't really have a lot of outside help. We just gave up all our other in-contact relationships, like in-person relationships, so that our both sets of grandparents could be involved. And then the farmers market started about, oh gosh, maybe a week or a couple days, I forget. It was within days of me having a minor surgery to correct one of the things that happened during birth. And it was so incredibly painful. That whole week of my life, just getting to the farmers market almost seemed like it was my Everest.
Wow.
And I showed up with starts. I started selling, and things didn't get easier, but they did get further along. So I got more clients, regular clients. People started talking with me about plants, and I started rambling about plants for hours on end, and discovered that was cognitively the only thing I could keep straight in postpartum. I could talk about growing plants, I could talk about cooking, I could talk about food and feeding people. And it took me a good 4 or 5 months before I could actually cook. For some reason, there was a huge disconnect between me and food. I didn't have an appetite. I couldn't think things through. Postpartum took away so much of what I was functionally able to do, that the farmers market was the only time where I felt like I was competent anymore. And I don't know if that was a sign so much as what I am just naturally compatible with and designed to do. I think there really is some kind of purpose behind me growing food and feeding my family and my community, because there was just something that made a clarity about it. And it was just kind of a saving grace, but it was also an extreme exertion at the same time. And then later on in the season, my sales started to drop, but I started to get other people saying, hey, what you're doing is really inspiring. Can you landscape my yard? Or can I buy fresh produce from you? Or, hey, I've got $100. Can I buy $100 worth of plant starts from you? And I'm like, yes to all of these things.
Right.
And I never had to explain the challenges it took to get there, or why I was so tired, or why I felt like I looked like a mess, or anything like that. It was the more I shared about how difficult the simplest things were, the things that I didn't think should be hard, that were hard, that we've all experienced, especially if anyone's experienced depression. You criticize yourself for not being able to brush your teeth, because you're like, a child can brush their teeth better than I can. Why this shouldn't be so hard, and yet it is. And you start like achievements start becoming out of whack. Like you almost see someone else growing a tomato plant as like, I'll never be able to do that. I couldn't even brush my teeth this morning. And I feel like I started getting some of those responses to every time I would do something. And I felt like I had audacity posting stuff on Instagram and Facebook and saying, this is what I grew today. This is what I made. This is what I put in my freezer. Or like when I took my farmer's market proceeds and bought a freezer, a really good one, or for me, really good anyway. And then filled it with meat. And I started reaping the seeds that I had sown, and it never got easier yet. And I know it's a yet at this point. I'm still working with my team to make sure that I get to a place where I feel good. But
Yeah.
I started bringing in the things that I really cared about.
Yeah.
And that was a huge turning point
Yeah.
where I think my value started to rebound, and my work became a focus in my life
Mm-hmm.
instead of this adherence to a job. And I still do work from home, bringing in maybe like at most $1,000 a month, but
Mm-hmm.
usually it's closer to like 600.
Yeah.
And I work when I can, and mainly I'm learning how to be a mom, and I'm
Yeah.
learning how to take care of a home. We have 2 acres almost,
Mm-hmm.
and a 3-bedroom house, and I'm new to basically all of it. I have had to learn how to wash clothes correctly. I've had to go through the ins and outs of why do or why don't you make your own soaps, and all of these experiences, these mundane experiences that
Yeah.
I didn't have value in before. And
Right.
I've forced myself to elevate the worth of those actions, because that is just something that no culture that I've lived in here in America has done yet. You have
Yeah.
to elevate the mundane in your life and turn
Yeah.
it from a job to your work.
Right. That's so good. I think so many people are gonna resonate with this, because my practice is mainly built with moms and kids. And I know when I go to work tomorrow, I'll
Yeah.
be able to have, these conversations with them, because there's so many moms today that feel like they're just not worth
Oh
it. Because
man.
all I do is the laundry. All I do
All
is
I
this
do,
and that.
I'm just this.
Right.
All I do is this.
Such negative talk.
It is. And it's, I mean, we all hear the buzzwords scarcity mindset and
Yeah.
abundance mindset.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I were to really peg down what abundance is, or rather something that you can use to identify true abundance as opposed to kind of a false abundance,
Right.
true abundance is its own magnifier.
Yeah.
It's exponential. It's like a plant that has 1,000 seeds inside to start 1,000 more plants, and each of those plants will produce hundreds of fruit that each have thousands of
Mm-hmm.
seeds inside.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bring home the bacon, so to speak, in the form of cash, like that cash usually doesn't create more cash.
Right.
But if you bring home seeds, and if you bring home acreage, and if you bring home community, and if you
Yeah.
bring home community favors,
Right.
or
A network.
those,
Yeah.
yeah, those connections, you bring home something that's exponentially bigger or more useful than you
Yeah.
could really if you just converted your time into money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, converting your time into something more important than, or not more important, for me it was more important, but that's biased. Converting your time into something that gives you more time or gives you more joy. I think that's really what I did. And I
Yeah.
had to do a lot of questioning, and I had to be kind of a radical within my own mind and then externally as well, in order to really try it.
Right. That's so good. And it's so amazing to have that experience and not go through, because some people go through years of depression and no drive and no
Oh
excitement,
yeah.
no joy, no, anything like that. And I don't know if you knew or not, but like one of the main reasons why I started this podcast, when did I start it? I don't know, a few months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, something like that, is because I wrote a book titled Rewire Your Brain, or Perspective, Rewire Your Brain for Success and Abundance.
I
And
saw that on your website, and I
okay,
was
yeah,
like, ooh, I think we're gonna have a really cool conversation, because
yeah, yeah.
I love diving into that.
And you talking about abundance, and I'm like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily like with the conversation that we had before, is like this Lamborghini lifestyle. Like, you make money to spend it all to look like you're rich, but instead you make money, which makes more money, which gives you security, which gives you peace, which then allows you to live in a mindset of ease,
Yeah,
and
living in a
and I
mindset of abundance
right,
really, I mean, sometimes people really have to shortcut all the actions and get to a mindset of you're abundant, right?
yeah,
Instead of abundance is this other thing. It's
right,
such a mindset flip.
yeah,
I think my therapist calls it reframing. I
mm-hmm,
love good counselors, the
yeah,
ones that really show you your worth
right,
and let you do the work to reframe how you see yourself.
right. And I love the concept that you talked about too. It's like you can use your money to make more money or make more time,
Yep.
and I use an example of when we're talking about kind of like goals and rewards and whatnot, where
Uh-huh.
if you're just taking your money and rewarding yourself with liabilities, things that don't
Yeah.
actually add a lot of value to you, that
Yeah.
may give you perceived value from other people, but that doesn't last. An example that I give is like, let's say a mom like started a business making a couple $100 a month or something like
Yep.
that, and you have a super small wash machine where it
Yep.
takes you 5 or 6 loads to do your family's laundry. Let's say you save up and buy, a couple $1,000, I don't know how much wash machines are, but a wash machine that can do your entire family's laundry in one load. Now
We
all of a
just
sudden you're
got new washers and dryers. So
there.
yeah,
You go. There's
a
my
couple
perfect.
thousand each. Yeah.
There you
New.
go. So, but now you do one load of laundry, and you're good. You have half your Saturday
Hmm.
back or Friday whenever you do laundry
It's
instead of spending
amazing
all
how much
day.
time is valuable and
Yeah.
you know what you value. And it's
Right.
so hard because people, you often see it from the reverse side. You often recognize the value of your time as soon as you're someplace you don't want to be.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And that's why, the conversation I had earlier, like those crises are good. Like you realize you don't want to be here
Yeah,
instead of wallowing in that.
it can be. And that's like my vision for my future is so
Yeah.
aligned with taking those crises and absolutely like flipping them inside out in the most profound way. And I
Yeah.
want to do that through the metaphor of a garden in the following way. So, you know how when you plant a potato, that is like a permanent fixture in your garden for the rest of yours and your children's lives. You will
Right.
never get rid of potatoes coming up in that area.
Yep.
Okay. So that potato comes up in the spring. Why are we planting potatoes in the spring if that's when they are already coming up on their own? Like, why are we doing all of this work? Why are we looking at that potato in our flower garden? This is a real life example because my
Mm-hmm.
husband has a dahlia garden and I had planted potatoes in it a couple years prior, and we
Okay.
cleaned it out of vegetables, quote unquote, before we planted flowers. And yet we have our perennial potato that always comes up year after year.
Mm-hmm.
And he's stomping around the garden going, why can't I get rid of this potato? And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I have endless potatoes.
Right. Right.
And taking that idea and applying it to everything,
Mm.
like, and I've seen this on the Abundance Plus group as well, because I know that Justin goes through on his podcast the idea of turning a challenge into an asset.
Yes.
And I think that is so vastly applicable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I I want to write a whole book on the volunteer garden. I want to
Mm.
see how much of my garden I can get to come back on its own, to the point where I break the rules of gardening completely. I just want
Mm.
to shatter them. I want to take every inconvenience and every time someone says ugh, and they don't even have words to describe where they're frustrated because they just feel that frustration that's been
Mm-hmm.
gnawing on them repetitively over and over again, the thing that they can't get rid of, or the thing that they just can't fix, or the thing that keeps breaking. And I want to
Mm.
use that crazy energy in order to make something, instead of pushing the cart that's pushing against you. I want to get
Yeah.
behind the cart and push it downhill with
Right.
that
Right.
momentum and
Right.
see how fast I can go,
Yeah.
and really magnify it and start getting my community connected, Like the less you have and the more you need, the more I want to provide, but not as an act where it takes the energy from me. I want to set something in motion that can't help but provide. It's like zucchini season rolling around and everyone has to lock their doors because you have naturally an overabundance of zucchini, and people are like getting zucchini blasted, like their mailbox, their cars, their porches are all full of zucchini. The unstoppable force of zucchini. I want to take that level of abundance and create a system that can't help but provide. And that's my dream. That's my vision that I could cast if I could cast any. And it started with this one little farmer's market, and then another Facebook post and another Instagram post, and talking about it here on your podcast that I'm so excited you connected with me to do today.
Me too. You know, and maybe we'll have to do a part 2 conversation next year. You know, it's like what's coming up now that you don't want it to come up. And because both of our lives are going to be so different. You'll have a 1.5-year-old, you know,
oh my God,
our garden will be I mean, it's going to be so different. So let's plan on that. I think that'd be really fun.
We can call it our greenhouse update, because
there we go.
The time in my life that we connected was the greenhouse part 1, when I was in the mindset of setting up, this is another real life story, setting up a greenhouse that we inherited essentially from another property. And I wanted to do it this time last year, and it blew away. So it was like an $11,000 investment. We didn't have to pay for it, but we lucked out and got it. And I said, I want to put it up before the winter. We had friends helping us. It was sleeting in mid-October, and it blew away in the first windy day of the year, which was that very next night. So that's the that's the crisis level. That's the season of life that I'm in now. And we still have the cement footprint for the greenhouse the way that we want to build it, and the way that we were planning to assemble it. But now we have a bunch of broken pieces and we're not sure what we're going to do. But in a year's time, I wonder what that story is going to turn out to be like. I wonder what the greenhouse situation is going to be. Greenhouse part 2.
Greenhouse part 2. I love it. I'm excited for it. I think you've dropped a lot of wisdom and encouragement. And, you know, where can people find out more about you or connect with you to tell you thank you, or even, you know, go get some starts from you?
Oh yeah, I would absolutely love if people reached out. I am usually fastest through Facebook Messenger. Jessica Cartwright is the name of my Facebook, because I've been using my personal Facebook. My J&J Acres, which is my business, J&J Acres, that Facebook is technically active, but I'm never on it. My Instagram is also a great place to reach me at who's_seen_Jezebel. And even YouTube, leaving me a comment on YouTube. J&J Acres is my YouTube channel, and there's pictures of me and my baby, and the other J&J Acres is a guy with a few kids. So they're two very distinguishable YouTube channels. But I'm always open to sharing more of my story, just spitballing back and forth. And every connection really feels like the best sign that I'm moving in a good direction.
Yeah, you are. It's inspiring. And I'm sad it's like sunset now here. I can't go like garden and do stuff, but I'm excited for tomorrow to come and to do more. And I appreciate you jumping on with me. And we'll stay connected to the Abundance group. Yeah, of course.
Enjoy the night. Seeds germinate in the dark. So
there we go. Perfect. All right, Jessica, have a good one.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Perspective Podcast. To connect with Dr. Bowman, follow him on Instagram at Dr. Chris Bowman. Until next time, make shift happen.